Hello and welcome to the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library's Sight and Sound Video History Project. I'm Tom Walton. The University of Toledo has a rich history of excellence in intercollegiate athletics, and a big part of that has been the success of the Rockets basketball program over the years, and more specifically, the success of our guest today. This man led the UT basketball Rockets to 5 Mid-American Conference championships. 3 times he was named MAC Coach of the Year. And over the course of his 22-year career at the University of Toledo, he amassed 377 wins. That makes him the winningest coach in the history of the MAC. And he is, of course, legendary UT basketball coach Bobby Nichols. And Coach, I've been looking forward to our conversation, so thanks so much for your time today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Tom.
We'll get to the basketball, but first let's talk a little bit about your formative years. I believe you were born in Jackson, Michigan in the summer of 1930. Can you talk a bit about your childhood, your special memories perhaps of your mom and dad?
Sure. Mom and Dad were just tremendous. There were 3 boys, and we lived in the same house, I'm going to say 17 years. 411 Stewart Avenue. Very unusual, but I lived a half a block from Jackson High School. But I went to St. John's High School, a mile away. But I did spend a lot of time at Jackson High School, but we thought we had a great upbringing. Mom and Dad were just tremendous. They wanted us to get a Catholic education. There were 3 boys, Bob, Tom, and Jim. Nothing but fond memories in regards to upbringing. My dad was into sports, and that gave us a head start. He had done a little coaching himself, and Mom was probably a little bit more of the disciplinarian in the family, although we don't think we needed that much, but on occasions it was needed. But I remember that on occasions when some of the fellows would come over, and I had a basket up on the garage, and a lot of times the guys would come over and we'd have 3-on-3 basketball games in the, not the backyard, but on the driveway. And every once in a while there'd be a break in the action, and Mom would come out, and the guys would look at me and say, "You got the best looking mother in the city of Jackson." And she was a beautiful lady.
Now, you were born in the heat of the Depression, Great Depression in 1930. And how did the Depression impact your childhood years?
I probably wasn't aware of it that much. My dad had a pretty good job, a laborer, so to speak, Macklin Grinding Wheel Company. And that turned out to be not so fortunate later in his life, but which we'll talk about. But I didn't notice it too much. I know we didn't have a car for a long time. I would guess it was probably my junior or senior year of high school. So I don't remember a car until I was about 16 years old. And I can't even figure out how my dad got to work, but he worked at Macklin Grinding Wheel Company, and always had a job, hard-working guy. But as far as I was concerned, it was a normal life.
But he was fortunate to have work during those years.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, one aspect of your childhood, which I find interesting, is you lived on the grounds of a nursing facility of some sort from age 5 to about age 10. Is that right?
My dad worked in a grinding wheel factory. Now, it was a very good job, especially in the Depression. But later in his life, it turned out that he had a form of TB from the dust in the factory. And my dad lived in a TB sanitarium. And so did my brother Jim. It turned out that everybody was exposed to this form of TB. It's because of the job my dad had. You know, in those days, in the grinding wheel factory was like a wheel, but it had sandpaper on the outside, and they were used in factories, so there was a lot of dust, and they didn't know about masks, glasses, or hard-toe shoes. So my dad got TB, So we all had to be examined for TB, and Brother Jim had it. So my dad lived in the TB sanitarium for, I'd say, 3-4 years. They operated with the idea of taking the TB out, the spot of TB in his lungs, and it still didn't get it all, so he went back in the TB sanitarium. So he had a long period in the TB sanitarium. Jim Nichols, my brother, his senior year of high school, he lived in the TB sanitarium, and the nuns brought him his schoolwork. And so he spent some time in the TB sanitarium in Jackson, Michigan. Tom, myself, and my mother had it, but she was called a non-carrier, and so they let her live at home by herself.
Wow. Wow.
So that explains the.
Yeah. Now you mentioned you had 2 siblings, of course, Jim and Tom. Were you competitive with your brothers growing up?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. There was a lot of competition.
What was the age difference?
Tom was 2 years behind me, and Jim was 2 more years behind us.
Okay, you were the oldest of the 3.
I was the oldest, and unfortunately, I'm the only one that's still alive. But yeah, there was a lot of competition, especially between myself and Tom, 2 years apart. Very unusual, but Tom and I's path, Tom Nichols, followed the same thing. We went to St. John's grade school and high school, and then we went to Jackson Junior College for 1 year. Then we both went to the University of Toledo for 4 years, and then we were both in the Army at Camp Rucker, Alabama for 1.5 years, and we both married beautiful ladies from blind dates. So it was a very unusual path.
Now your elementary and secondary education was in Jackson, as you mentioned.
Yes.
Did you enjoy all sports in school, or did basketball claim your attention early on?
No, not really. St. John's High School and grade school is so small that you almost had to play all sports or you were a sissy. So we all played, most of us played football, basketball, baseball, and we ran track.
Nothing worse than being called a sissy. Yeah.
No, you can't, especially at a Catholic school. But so I played all 4 sports. I had a real fondness for football, but my senior year I was 135 pounds, and that wasn't going to present too many opportunities in the future. But we had a good team. St. John's versus St. Mary's was a real Thanksgiving Day battle. It's like Ohio State and Michigan, Army and Navy, but on a smaller scale. But to answer your question, we played all 4 sports. Tom and I competed a great deal in the backyard, in the neighborhood, because our ages were pretty much the same.
Were you a good student?
Yes. I had nothing but nuns from the 1st grade to the 12th grade. The school was so small. It's a 3-story building, a 3-story brick building on Cooper Street in Jackson. And the first floor was basically the first 5 or 6 grades. And the nuns were super teachers. You just go from one room, 1st grade, this room, 2nd grade, this room, a different nun. 3rd grade, different room, a different nun. And of course, they were all good teachers, but it seems to me they were getting meaner as we were going along. And then the 2nd floor was the 9th, 10th, and 11th, and 12th grade. So I had nothing but nuns.
They must have really been mean by the time you got to high school.
Yes, I would. They were excellent teachers, but we got a great education.
Now, you graduated from high school in 1947?
48.
48, and you headed off to college at the University of Toledo?
No, I really went to Jackson Junior College for 1 year.
Okay.
And what happened was a bunch of fellas that lived in Jackson, we got together and said, let's go to Jackson High School and have a real good team. and we were starting to mature a little bit, grow a little bit. One fella was in the Navy for 3 years, and he lived in the neighborhood. He came back, and so we had a very good team at Jackson Junior College, and we got opportunities.
This is a basketball team.
From basketball, yes. So that gave us the opportunity to continue our education, playing sports, and
Well, how did you end up at TU, as it was known in those days?
that's a very good question. Before my dad got sick, he moved up in the Macklin grinding wheel factory. He moved up and he became a salesperson. And his area for selling was Fort Wayne, South Bend, and Toledo. So he would make calls in those 3 areas. And he loved sports, so he came to a game at the University of Toledo when Jerry Bush was coaching the basketball team. And my dad came, and he was very knowledgeable about sports. One of the wisest things he ever did, he came back and he said to me, "You could play basketball at the University of Toledo for Jerry Bush." And I said, "Why would you say that?" And he says, "They have an Eastern style of basketball." Jerry Bush was from New York. Most of the players were from New York, and they played a game that was, today it's called playing without the ball. A lot of basketball, especially today, is being played one-on-one. Well, this, you were dangerous off the ball, and that was one of my fortes when I was at Jackson, St. John's High School and Jackson Junior College. I was very good without the basketball. And my dad noticed that, and he said, "That'd be an ideal place for you." So we got in touch with Coach Jerry Bush, and in those days you were allowed to do it. He brought me down for a workout, and there must have been about 15 guys at this workout. I'm going to say it was in the summer of 1949, and lo and behold, he offered me a basketball scholarship, which was under the auspices of what they call work study, which is another story, but Jerry offered us a full basketball scholarship, and I came to the University of Toledo in 1949 after the 1 year at Jackson Junior College. So having a good team, a bunch of guys from Jackson. There was a Jackson High School, St. Mary's High School, and St. John's, and this fella came back from the Navy, and he grew from about 5'10" to 6'3", and so we had a pretty good team.
Any of your teammates from Jackson join you at the University of Toledo?
Yes. The fellow that was in the Navy, Phil Martin, had a tremendous career at the University of Toledo. He was a year behind me, even though he was older, because he had been in service. He followed me at the University of Toledo, and my brother Tom did also. Another fellow went to Bowling Green, Vernon Allen. He was on the freshman team with Charlie Scher and those fellas. So we all did pretty well in regards to athletics.
And you played then for what, 3 years at the University of Toledo?
I played 4, but freshmen were not eligible
Right.
the first year.
And you, I think, became one of the co-captains in your senior year?
Yes. The senior year, which would have been 52, 53, Harry Nicholson, who stayed here in Toledo, became Dr. Harry Nicholson. We were roommates for 4 years. He and I were co-captains our senior year.
Any special memories of that senior year come back for you? I know you had a good year on the court, but what do you remember most about that senior season?
Well, we had a very good year. Actually, when I first got to Toledo, the freshman season, the University of Toledo was not in the Mid-American Conference. My sophomore year, we were not in the Mid-American Conference, and that was a great basketball team. Toledo played Louisville twice, Dayton twice, Cincinnati twice.
Was it in any league at all at that point?
No league.
Playing independently?
Independently. And then my junior year, we entered the Mid-American Conference. In my junior and senior year, we had good teams, very good teams. But Cincinnati was in the league at the time, and we weren't quite as good as they were. But my junior and senior year, the starting lineup was, and they were very good players. John Pazador, Bert Spice, Phil Martin, and that's the fellow from Jackson, Michigan. Bert Spice and John Pazador were from DeVilbiss High School. Myself and Harry Nicholson. And we had a good team, but just not quite as good as Cincinnati.
But going to UT turned out to be a great decision, because it was at the university that you met a woman named Barbara Jane Euler and married her the same year you graduated, I guess, what, in 1953. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Can you tell us how you two met? You already mentioned blind date. How'd that come about?
Actually, I was a substitute on a blind date.
Substitute
Boy,
on
that's a
blind date.
great piece of luck, isn't it?
It's a double blind date.
Well, there was a fella on the team, and he was going to have a date. I didn't know the other girl, but they had fixed this fella up with a date with Barbara Euler. Well, he left, and in those days, guys were coming and going because of the draft. The draft was still going on, and if your grades weren't up to par, or if your draft board needed people, they'd come and get you. But my draft board was very good to me, to the extent if your grades were, if you're making normal progress towards a degree, you could stay. Well, this fella that Barbara had the date with, he was gone the night. He left the team and he was gone, so somebody said, would you take his place? And so I took this fella's place on a date.
He was gone because he'd been drafted?
Yes.
So you owe a certain debt to the U.S. government, Uncle Sam.
I probably owe the Uncle Sam a great deal, because you know, when I went in, I thought, boy, this is going to be 2 years of waste. And boy, it was one of the best things that ever happened. But Barbara and I had a blind date the night of a basketball game. Can't recall exactly what we did, but we hit it off real good. Barbara may have been a student. That was my junior year. She may have been a student, although she left and she went to work at Toledo Steel Products. But we hit it off very well right from the very beginning. She worked at Toledo Steel Products, and then we got married actually while I was in the Army. I graduated. I had 2 courses to take. I should have graduated in June of 1953. I had 2 courses to go, so I graduated September 14th, and I went in the Army September 15th. And I went through basic training and got my first leave, and we came back, and we got married December 22nd, 1953.
What motivated you as a young college graduate and someone about to get married to join the Army?
I didn't join.
You did get drafted?
I got drafted.
Okay. So they were only patient with you for a certain length of time, and then came the letter.
They were patient for 5 years in summer school. Yeah, they were interested in me. I got drafted.
Where did you spend your years in the Army?
Call it Camp Rucker, Alabama. I was there for about a year. That's where I met Bo Schembechler. I was fortunate to be on the basketball team at Camp Rucker, Alabama. It was we had a Colonel Williams who was the commander of the post, and Bo Schembechler was the athletic director and the football coach, and I was on the basketball team. So we had a relationship there. My second year, because of the sickness in my family, my dad being put into his TB sanitarium, Jim Nichols being put into a TB sanitarium, and my mom having to be isolated by herself, I was given a compassionate transfer, and I spent my last year in the Army at Erie Ordnance Depot.
Or just down the road near
Just
Fort
down
Clinton.
the road here. So actually, Barbara and I lived, my second year in the Army, we lived in Nashville on the campus of the University of Toledo. It was a housing project. She was working at the university, and I was in the Army my second year.
Now, was it while you were in the Army that you lost your younger brother, Jim?
No, it happened about my second year at Toledo Central Catholic High School. He actually did not die from TB. My younger brother died in an automobile accident right after his senior year of high school.
How did that affect you?
It was tough. It was very tough. Jim was a very interesting guy. He it was just a tough deal because he didn't have a chance. Just think about it. Your senior year of high school, TB sanitarium, and then an automobile accident right afterwards. And he had a good future, and it just didn't work out. It was tough for everybody. And I remember I was at Central Catholic High School, and I remember the funeral, a lot of people from Central Catholic, Tom McHugh and Dick Finn, other people came to the funeral in Jackson, Michigan.
Now, you mentioned after leaving the service, you did start your coaching career at Central Catholic High School here in Toledo. And you were extremely successful there over the course of 7 seasons. You won 111 games and you only lost 39 between 1956 and 1963. A whole different atmosphere at the high school level than, of course, you encountered later at the collegiate level. Did you really enjoy coaching high school boys?
Loved it. I thought I died and went to heaven. St. John's, where I came from, was all nuns, and my class was 50 people at St. John's. And I go to Central Catholic High School, and I don't know the exact number, but there was probably 11 or 1,200 students at Central Catholic High School at the time. And Monsignor Harrington was one of the greatest men I ever come across. He was the principal at Toledo Central Catholic High School, and it was mostly nuns and about 7 guys that were football and basketball coaches. And it was all nuns and Monsignor Harrington. He ran a great school. There's a whole lot of talent at Toledo Central Catholic High School. I was just amazed at the talent.
And of course, you didn't have to recruit because you choose your team from the enrollment, such as it is.
Yeah. How that happened, ending up at Toledo Central Catholic High School, was one of my all-time favorite stories. I was living on the campus of the University of Toledo. Barbara Nichols was working at the University of Toledo in the counseling and testing department, and we lived in a Quonset hut, and there were about 12 of them on the campus. They called it Nashville. There was a knock on the door, and I had known this person a long time, Tom McHugh. He played football at Toledo Central Catholic High School. He played football at Notre Dame. We were good friends. He knocked on the door of this Quonset hut, and he says, I want to talk to you. I want to run this by you. Fred George was the athletic director, football, basketball, baseball coach at Central Catholic High School. He left. He's going to the Cleveland area. I'm going to be the football coach, Tom McHugh. He's talking. I'm going to be the football coach. You're going to be the basketball coach. Dick Finn will be the baseball coach, and we'll make him athletic director because we don't want to do all that work.
He had it all figured out for you.
And I says, Tom, how are you going to do that? He says, as soon as you say yes, I'll go tell Monsignor Harrington tomorrow. And he sold him on the whole thing. Now, the pay was $4,000 each. So Monsignor got 3 coaches and an athletic director for $4,000 each. We taught, there are 8 periods a day at Central Catholic High School, or was in those days. We taught 7 periods. The bonus of being a coach was you got the 8th period off. And Tom McHugh coached football. I coached basketball. Finn coached baseball. The interesting part was we were each other's assistant. I was assistant football coach. McHugh was assistant baseball coach. And Finn was freshman coach. We all helped each other, and the place went wild. We had a lot of success, but Tom McHugh orchestrated all that, and the famous words were, "I'll tell Monsignor tomorrow."
Well, thank goodness for the University of Toledo that he did, as it turned out down the road. And in 1963, you left Central Catholic and went down the road to UT's arch rival, the Bowling Green State University Falcons, where you coached for 1 season with Porky Schaller on his staff. Why the move to Bowling Green?
Well, that's a big step up. It's a tremendous opportunity, and I will always be thankful to Bowling Green. Dwight Perry was there. Harold Anderson was the athletic director, and Porky Schaller, the basketball coach. They gave me that's a tough step to make from high school to college. Somebody's got to be looking over your shoulder and helping you out. So I'm very thankful. And of course, it was a great learning year. And I learned a lot from Warren Porky Schaller. We had Tom Baker, Howard Butch Comice on the team. And I can practically name the starting 5, Jay, it was a Bill Gast, Rick Coven, Bob Van Poppel, Phil Rickner. We had a very good team, good people at Bowling Green, and it was just the opportunity that they gave to me.
Now, wasn't that the year that Howard Comize went on to lead the nation in scoring without a 3-point shot in those days?
Yeah, the interesting part about that whole thing was Howard led the nation in scoring 1963, 1964. We had a good team, a lot better than they expected. Howard led the nation in scoring, but guess what? He was the best defensive player on the floor. He's a tough guy. I've met a lot of tough guys in my days, but he's at the top of the list. He excelled defensively, and he's just a tough competitor.
Now, Nate Thurmond had already moved on to the NBA by the time you got there. Is that correct?
Yes. I remember the team that left was Nate Thurmond, Wavy Jr., Elijah Chapman, Howard Comize, Tom Baker, and Pat Haley.
That was a great team.
That was a very good team. They won. They went up to East Lansing and played in the NCAA tournament. Yes, it was a very good team.
Then you spent 1 year, of course, at BGSU, and then in 1964 you joined the staff of Coach Eddie Melvin up at your alma mater at the University of Toledo. Must have felt like you were coming home.
Yes, it did. Yeah, Barbara and I we had a good time in Bowling Green, but Toledo was home. I came to Toledo in 1949, and she lived in Toledo, and it was just a case of coming on. Ironically, we came back to the same house we lived in. We lived in Castlewood, and when we went to Bowling Green, we put it up for sale. It didn't sell, but we came back. It was still on the market.
Well, now, when you left the Bowling Green to come back to UT, was it with the expectation that you would be head coach, or did you have no assurances of that?
I had no assurances at all.
No sign that Eddie Melvin might be leaving within a year?
None at all. I'll tell you, actually, I used to watch Eddie Melvin's practice sessions before I went to Bowling Green. Eddie Melvin's a very good coach. He had more basketball knowledge in his little finger than a lot of people. And I look forward to being his assistant coach.
Well, and just 1 year later, then, you succeeded him, though, as head coach at UT. Do you remember your emotions at the time?
Yes. maybe I wasn't ready for all this. uh, I was surprised.
In what sense?
Well, 2 years on the college level, I don't know if that prepares you for University of Toledo, Mid-American Conference. It's a big step. Somebody once said there isn't much space between those two spots on the bench, assistant coach and the head coach, but I'll tell you what, there's a lot of difference between those two spots.
Yeah, when the program is your total responsibility, it's a little different mindset, isn't it? Do you remember your first win as a college head coach? I believe it might have been over Baldwin Wallace.
I didn't know that.
It was the first of 377, so I'm not surprised you might not remember the details. Coach, statistics don't define a man, but yours are pretty impressive, and I'm going to embarrass you a little bit to share a few. I hope that's all right. 111 wins at Central Catholic, 377 wins at the University of Toledo, a winning record in 20 of your 22 seasons at UT, 5 consecutive seasons with 20 wins or more, 5 MAC championships, MAC Coach of the Year 3 times, Ohio College Coach of the Year 4 times. Must be a real source of pride as you look back on it.
Well, we've had a fascinating life. We've had a good life. I will tell you this: we had a lot of good players. I had 2 very good assistant coaches. Bob Conroy was with me 15 years, and Bob and I were alone. I'm going to say 4 or 5 years together. It was just myself and Bob Conroy. Today they got looks like they got 6 guys in suits on the bench. It was Bob Conroy and myself for about 5 years.
Now, what was Bob's principal function? Was he your chief recruiter?
Yes, he had a great personality with people. He loved people, and he had a knack for if somebody gave him a no, he just moved on. And he was also very good at finding the right people for our program, and that was one of the reasons for our success. Getting a good basketball player is important, but talent and character are more important. And Bob had a knack for finding people that had all those things. As much basketball ability, and then talent and character and discipline. He put them together.
You've obviously felt fortunate to have a guy who excelled at that. Was recruiting something that you didn't particularly care to do?
I didn't mind it that much. I would say that I didn't want to be a bother to the player. I did a lot of things my little own way. I used to take a lot of newspapers, and eventually we got a graduate assistant, and he would pull the sport pages. And so if we were after a young man, let us say in Benton Harbor, Michigan, I would get the Benton Harbor newspaper. So when his team did well or he did well, I'd cut the article out and mail it to him. And so I had contact with him, but I just didn't like making the phone calls that you had to make. Sometimes it was tough to make all the trips and do the other things. I remember on occasions we'd make a goal. We were after a young man from Traverse City, for example, Tom Kozelko. And Bob and I decided that we would see Tom Kozelko play every home game his senior year. And of course, Bob made more trips than I did, so that was a part of it. You couldn't go as much as the assistant could go. Then eventually Jim McDonald joined us, and Jim's a very good teacher of the game of basketball, and we were just a very good combination, staying together 15 and 12 years. And actually, if you look at it, I've been around basketball at the University of Toledo since 1949. so I know a lot about it. And maybe the 12 and 15 years that Bob Conroy, Jim McDonald, and myself were together may have been the best era of basketball the University of Toledo has ever had.
Well, I don't think there's any question about that, Coach. And many of those 377 wins you achieved, a lot of them came at the expense of Bowling Green State University down the road. There's no better rivalry, I don't think, in the Mid-American Conference than the UT-BG rivalry, the Battle of I-75, as it's referred to. Can you talk about that rivalry a little bit?
And
having coached at both schools.
Yes. The night of the game was just out of sight. I mean, you couldn't hear yourself think. Bowling Green played in Anderson Arena, I guess you call it, but it was, see, what, 2,800 or 3,600 in that area. But it was jammed every single night. You couldn't get a ticket. Toledo people were good fans, couldn't get tickets for the Bowling Green Toledo game. I one time made this statement. I was half serious, but that rivalry was so tough that if I was in my car on I-75 going from Toledo to Bowling Green, I'm on the highway now, I'm on I-75, I could tell when I was getting near Bowling Green because I'd get a headache in the car because of that arena. That's how much noise there was.
It was a tough place for an opponent to play, wasn't it?
It was a tough place to play.
Yeah. Now the players, obviously, your players at UT looked forward to beating the BG's players. They looked forward to beating you very much. But did the coaches look at it the same way, or as in the grand tradition of coach speak, was it just one more game on the schedule?
Oh no, it was a big game.
For the coaches.
Yeah, it was a big game. But
yeah.
You wanted to, not that you wouldn't want to lose a whole bunch of games and then beat Bowling Green twice and think you've been a success, but that game had a red letter around it. That was on the schedule. It had a red mark around it.
You mentioned Porky Schaller, you mentioned Eddie Melvin. If you had to identify who taught you the game of basketball, how would you answer that?
Tom, that's a very good question. I'm going to give you several different answers, and I'm being very honest about it. I learned a lot from my players. Tom Kozelko, for example, has one of the prettiest right and left-hand hook shots you've ever seen. Just beautiful. I've tried to teach players that shot. I call it the Kozelko hook shot. And Steve Mix in the pivot area, the guy's wholesale murder. If Steve Mix gets you on his back, it's over with.
It's over.
You can't. There's nothing you can do about it. He is so good with his feet, moving his feet. He gets you on his back. He keeps you on his back, and he does it by moving his feet. And then they throw him the ball, and he's going to shoot a 6-foot shot or an 8-foot shot. Here's another example. We were practicing one day, and actually we were working on setting picks. We're working on setting picks, teaching the players how to set picks. We're doing a good job, except we're not doing a good job when one guy's playing defense. We had a young man named Dick Miller. He was a freshman from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I can't think of the high school right now, but Milwaukee, Wisconsin, he's a freshman. We can't set a pick when he's on defense. So we watched what he did, and we adopted the way he defended a pick. And so I learned a lot from the players. I learned a lot from Eddie Melvin. I learned a lot from Warren Porky Schaller. I learned a lot from Jerry Bush, especially learning how to play without the basketball. And then I also learned from other people. Jim McDonald is not innovative, but he's a very good teacher of the game of basketball. So it really doesn't even have my name on it. The end results, I guess, we got credit for, but it's a whole bunch of other people.
Would it be fair to say your philosophy of coaching stressed defense? Was it just as important to prevent a score as to get one yourself?
Yes. We thought a lot of playing defense, and I'll tell you why. We had no, this is just one example, but we had a defensive player. His name was Jeff Seaman. The night we played Indiana in opening Centennial Hall, Jeff played a very good game. And he didn't score as many points as you would think, but the way he played defense was as good as 25 points, him scoring 25 points. And so we always kept that in mind. We actually kept it in mind by the style of play that we played offensively, by the style of play we played defensively, by the people that we played. Guys knew they were going to be practice players for a while until they became defensive players. So they knew they were going to make progress in regards to playing time by the way they played defense. And also, when they came to Toledo, they probably came with the idea that they knew that they had to have defense up there at the top.
They knew coming in what was expected of them.
Yeah.
You've already mentioned a couple of the great players you had. Can you single out who was your greatest player? Would it be Steve Mix? Would it be Ray Walford?
That's a tough one. You know, I got 6 beautiful children, and you're going to ask me which one I like the best.
I won't ask you that.
I love them all. No, we had a lot of good players, lots of good players. Now, we had some players, I would call them, they came in and delivered a haymaker punch. Steve Mix, John Brisker, John Rudley, they came in and played immediately. Now, some of it dealt with the program wasn't as established as it was later on. Dick Miller came in and delivered a haymaker punch. He started the first game of his freshman year. Tom Kozelko. Now, there were other players that came in and they worked their way up. And sometimes they're even better than those fellas. When you have to work your way up, you're less likely to give up the ship when things get tough. And so we had players, I didn't invent the term, but I heard the players using it. I was a practice player for 2 years, Coach. And what he meant was that he was learning the game, to play the game the right way and to become a defensive player. We had one fellow, his name was Mike Larson. He played as a freshman. He scored 8 points his freshman year for the season. He's in the Hall of Fame for 1,000 points and 500 rebounds. He didn't deliver a haymaker punch his freshman year. He had to work his way up. And so we had a lot of players that worked their way up, and there's nothing wrong with that.
That leads to a question I wanted to ask you. What gave you greater pleasure as a coach? Was it coaching a player who was loaded with talent, or a player maybe who needed a lot of work and what coaches often refer to as a project?
I think that player that's a project there's a lot of satisfaction into it.
A lot of teaching to do.
Yeah, a lot of teaching and motivation. And it does take some character and discipline on their part. Probably one of the things that's going astray today is, players come in and want to play immediately, and it's causing some unusual situations. Our program was probably just the opposite of that situation. We had a lot of players that came in and worked their way up.
Sure.
A lot.
We talked about some of your favorite players. What about some of your favorite teams? Do you, as you reflect back, do you think of some teams perhaps that didn't have a superstar but excelled because they meshed as a team?
That's a good question, Tom. That era that we had, basically these fellas, Jay Lehman, Tim Selgo, Stan Joplin, Dick Miller, Jim Swaney, Harvey Nichols, Kenny Montague. That team.
And this was about when? For our
That
viewers.
would be 76 to 79 or 80.
Okay, mid to late 70s.
Yes. They were very, very successful. They were just great as a group. Now, Dick Miller delivered a haymaker punch, moved into the starting lineup, and Jay Lehman came within 2 games of the starting lineup. But, for example, we had Jay Lehman, Tim Selgo, and Stan Joplin. We had 3 guards as good as anybody had in the league. And we had 3 guards maybe as better than anybody had 1 guard. And the other players, so that was a very good area for us. There is another team, started the season 0-4. 0-4. Now, we did play pretty good teams. We played at Loyola Chicago, at Ohio State, at South Carolina, and at Missouri. Those are 4 good teams, all on the road. We lost all 4. Actually, we were competitive, and maybe not the game at South Carolina. The team won 18 of the next 21 games.
Wow. Yeah.
End of the season, 18-7.
And when about would that have been, do you recall?
That was Mike Larson. That would have been before. That was back in the Fieldhouse era.
Oh, yeah.
Probably the era, I'm going to say 72 to 76. We moved in the field, we left the Fieldhouse in 76, 75, 76. So it had been 72 to 76. That team, if you take a team 0-4, they had to believe in the system. They had to stick together. They had to stick with the coaching staff and figure out the things that they needed to do a little bit better, and they did. They were as good at, didn't win the Mid-American Conference, didn't go anyplace because the NCAA was only taking 24 or 36 teams. That team was as good as any team we had.
It's interesting you mentioned the field house, the old field house at UT, back when it was still called TU. Did the field house provide you with that home court advantage that you spoke of at Anderson Arena?
Yes. Yes. I was there as a player, 49 to 53, and you know, at the time, the field house was a dirt floor, and the floor was dirt, and the playing floor was raised about 2 feet off the ground, and that it was a great place to play. And the floor was very lively, it was easy on your legs, and but sometimes the opposing teams called it a dimly lit airplane hangar, you know. So it was a tremendous advantage for us. And then they remodeled the place and put in that era, 49 to 53, was bleachers. But the place was sold out. People came to the games in suits and fedora hats. And then they remodeled it and put in chair-type seats on both sides. And it became and the floor was a wooden inlaid floor that was laid in cork. And it was a tough place for teams to play. So we definitely had a home court advantage.
Was some of that lost perhaps when with the move to Savage Hall years later?
Yes, maybe a little bit of the home court advantage was lost because in the field house they were a little bit closer, but the building was sold out. You know, we went from the field house, I'm going to say, was 4,800. We go to 9,980, and when we were there, it was sold out. So we didn't lose very much, and the fans were very good and very faithful. We were fortunate that we brought in very good basketball teams. We had almost every Big Ten team visited the Centennial Hall.
Now you coached against many outstanding coaches over the years, including in the MAC. Is there anyone who stands out in particular that you enjoyed matching wits with?
We, we always had a great rival with Bowling Green, of course, or Porky Schaller and Pat Haley and Bob Conabear. And I think the Bowling Green Toledo tradition fit in there. There was a coach at Northern Illinois I thought was a very good coach, John McDougall, very good coach. I had a good relationship with Johnny Orr up in Michigan, and he was very good to us and to the extent of playing at Ann Arbor and at Toledo. Mm-hmm. So I enjoyed that relationship basically because they'd schedule us, and we had some success.
Well, you had some successes, putting it mildly, when you're talking about the Big Ten. I think in one stretch, over 4 years in the late 70s, your Rockets played Big Ten opponents 5 times and won them all. Was there some special joy on your part in beating the big boys?
Well, I think the players looked forward to it. You know, they most likely got snubbed by Big Ten coaches, so they had something.
A little chip on the shoulder.
A little chip on their shoulder is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So yes, maybe had a red letter around it.
When it came to scheduling, Coach, did you try to schedule? What was your philosophy? As many games as you could get, maybe in a home and home if they do it with major programs?
Yes. One of the unusual things about my contract at Toledo, when we first got started, we played, the NCAA rule was 24 games. Mm-hmm. And my contract read, gave you salary and a couple other things, and then it said you would play 13 home games and 11 on the road. That was part of my contract. So I had to schedule 13 home games. So it took a lot of hard work. A couple teams we had to ask to come to Toledo, and we couldn't pay them back. But then they expanded to 26 and 27 games, and it became 14 and 12 and 15 and 12. So you had to work hard at getting home games, basically because we had a whole bunch of season ticket holders. And the athletic director, he used to multiply the number of season ticket holders times the number of home games times the price of the tickets. So that was called income. Income. There's another term in there, but it was money, income in the budget.
Revenue source.
Yeah. So we were obligated to play so many home games, but we did work at. I remember we got South Carolina to come to Toledo. South Carolina had bolded the ACC. They left in the summertime. And so when they left, the ACC says nobody's going to play South Carolina. So I called Frank McGuire, and he's kind of over the barrel. He needed a home game, and he needed games. So I said, we'll come there, and you come here. And we got him to do that. And there were a couple other things that happened. I can't think. I had a good relationship with Al McGuire at Marquette. And he played us 1 for 1. We used to call it 1 for 1. One at your place and one at our place. Mm-hmm. I guess a lot of them don't do that today, but we were fortunate to be able to do that.
Clearly so much depended on the relationships you established with other coaches.
Yes, it did. Yeah, I had a good relationship with Johnny Orr, Al McGuire. Mm-hmm. I had a good relationship with the coach at Michigan State. We played them at Toledo.
Judd Heathcote?
It was a fellow by the name of Gus Kanakis. It was before
Heathcote.
Yeah, yes.
Mm-hmm. I remember Judd Heathcote saying once, after losing to a MAC school, particularly, this happened to be Bowling Green, but it could have been UT as well, I will never again take my team into a MAC gymnasium. He said, you can't win that. Even if you win the game, you're expected to. But, yeah, you had a lot of success against the Big Ten.
I remember I think we had Northwestern in our Blade Classic. That was a big advantage for us, and never figure out what happened there. But we would bring in 3 teams. We gave them pretty good guarantees because we had 9,000 people, and we included in the season ticket sale. But we had Northwestern in our Blade Classic. And Judd Heathcote was there as a scout. So he's watching Northwestern play somebody. After the game, they interviewed him, and he said, "I'm happy I'm playing Northwestern and not Toledo," which was a compliment.
Sure, sure it was. Of course, your success, as with most successful coaches, leads to entreaties from other places, and you had other schools who expressed an interest in perhaps wooing you away from the University of Toledo. I think at one point, University of Wisconsin came calling, and you had some discussions with them. Did you have ambitions to move on, perhaps to a Big Ten program or somewhere else?
No, I did not.
What kept you in Toledo?
I loved it. University of Toledo is a great school, just a great school. Here's an example. We got a medical college. My former players, 5 of them are medical doctors. Got numerous engineers, a couple of superintendents of schools. So we had everything that we needed. I really didn't show an interest in places. I did not. Basically, I responded to Wisconsin. I did it because of Doit Perry. Doit Perry was the athletic director, football coach at Bowling Green. I had a very good relationship with him. His son-in-law was the football coach, Dave McLean, was the football coach at Wisconsin. And Doit put my name in with Elroy Hirsch, who was the athletic director at Wisconsin. I did respond to their interest. I was really not that much interested in leaving Toledo. You got everything you want at Toledo. It's a great school. Academically, it is a beautiful campus. We used to sell the campus. We used to sell our curriculum.
It's certainly one of the prettiest urban campuses in the country, I should think. Coach, how has the game of basketball, college basketball, changed, do you think, from the years of when you were coaching to what you see today?
Tough question for me. Today it's a little bit more one-on-one basketball.
Has the concept of team play is kind of diminished?
Yes. For example, Jerry Bush's, which I played for, was 3-man plays, 2 or 3 people doing things together. Eddie Melvin's was patterns, 5 people doing things together. And we were a combination of those things. Today it's more isolation and one-on-one. The word athletic ability has entered the game in a very strong way. I don't know if it's right or not. I just was involved in reading a book. In the book, the name of the book is When the Garden Was Eden. And it's about the New York Knickerbockers in 1969 to 1975. Dave DeBuscher, Bill Bradley, Willis Reed, Walt Frazier, but coached by Red Holzman. Team basketball. And I don't think we see as much of that as you used to. I'm not saying that it can be done or it can't be done because I've been away from the sport.
Of course, one major change we have to talk about, and that is that in your day, players often stayed for 4 years and used up their eligibility. Nowadays, some of these kids come out of high school and they're obligated to play 1 year, but then they're gone to the NBA if they're good enough. What do you feel about that?
Well, that's that word, once in a great while a guy comes in and he delivers a haymaker punch. He's good enough to play immediately. You might be better off with people that work their way up. They come in with the idea for me to get playing time, I got to get better. I got to do the fundamentals better. I got to shoot better. I got to have a better field goal percentage. I got to play better defense. I got to have a good rebounding rate. And I don't know if they want to do that today because it seems like it's a philosophy of play me or I'll leave.
You mentioned a bit ago some of the stories about the old field house at the University of Toledo. I got the sense you had more to say about that. Memories come back of the old field house for you?
Sure do. Actually, we spent a lot of time in the old field house. When I say we, there was a secretary at the University of Toledo in the athletic department named Haru Thompson. She was the athletic secretary when I got there in 1949 as a player, and then she stayed until about 1986. 2 or 3 presidents wanted her to leave the athletic department and become secretary to the president. She loved it in the athletic department. Many people thought she was the athletic director. She was so good. But she spent a lot of time there. So did I. I lived in the field house for 2 years. That was my home. It was a dormitory. When we got here in '49, there were only 5 buildings on the campus of the University of Toledo. University Hall, and it took me about a half semester to figure that building out because when you look at it from Monroe Street, you're looking at the 3rd floor.
From Dorr Street?
Well, Dorr or Bancroft Street.
Bancroft.
When you look at it from Bancroft, University Hall, you're looking at the 3rd floor. The first floor is the 3rd floor.
Right.
When you come in the side door, it's the 2nd floor. When you come in the back doors, it's the 1st floor. The building is a 5-story building. I didn't figure that out until, but I lived in the field house. There's a dormitory in the field house. There's 2 gymnasiums and then the field house floor, a swimming pool. And my office was in that field house. So Haru spent a whole bunch of time there, and so did I. I lived in Conley Hall. Conley Hall, one end was football players and the other end was basketball, baseball, track, and whatever. There's a tunnel that goes from the field house to the University Hall. Sometimes we never went outdoors. The athletes, we lived in the field house and we went to school in University Hall. There was only University Hall, field house, Libby Hall, which was the student union, and the 2nd floor was the girls' dormitory. There was McKinnon Hall, which was a boys' dormitory, and the sorority houses at the corner of Bancroft and Middlesex.
I'm sure there were a lot of days when that tunnel came in handy in the middle of February.
Oh yeah.
You mentioned the women's students, of course. We've also seen the emergence of women's college basketball, and the UT women's program has been extremely successful. Even won the national women's NIT in 2011. What's your opinion of the women's game?
They're doing a terrific job out there. Just a great job. Now they've had success over the years. I haven't followed it. I followed it, but I wasn't around all the time. There was a coach there named Bill Finelli that got things started. And of course, Tricia Cullip is doing just a tremendous job. She's got a great program. And she's had people come in and stay for 4 and 5 years. Nama Shafir, for example,
Great player. As a matter of fact, the women's program has been so successful, as has the program at Bowling Green. You talk about adding to the rivalry. The women's program has helped do that at both schools. They're probably the 2 best programs in the conference.
You got 2 very good programs. You got 2 big rivalries, and tickets are tough to get for both ball games. And that's I love the word program. Having a good basketball program. Sometimes it's not all the winning the game. It's having a good program, and that over the years. one of the things that we were very fortunate, I don't remember exactly, but we came in first, second, or third about 15 years in a row. And
now, a good coach is a good coach. Do you foresee the day when we might see a woman as a major college basketball coach for the men?
Probably happen.
Is there any reason it shouldn't happen? I can't.
Well, I think it's going on. A couple of high schools in the East, I read about one. It's probably going to happen.
Now, your players couldn't play unless they were academically eligible. How important was it to you that they get to class and do well?
Very important. We took a lot of pride in that. I don't remember the exact statistics, but we had a very high rate of people that graduated that were in our basketball program. I don't know the exact number, but it's probably close to 90 to 92%. And we've had, as I said, 5 medical doctors and one of the best things about my job is the people I met along the way. And they've stayed to be, they're in my life today, they're friends today. I think that's one of the best things about my job is the people I met along the way, good people. And I'm very thankful for that.
Now, your insistence on academic performance led to the suspension of a couple players along the way who happened to be black, and that led to some accusations of racism. And I know people who know you know that was ridiculous. But what was your take on all that, Coach?
Well, it was a tough thing to go through. The end results, actually it helped us. We placed a great deal of emphasis on going to school, and it turned out to be the right thing to do because the program got better. But it was a tough thing to do.
Still, it had to be hurtful to you on a personal level.
Sure, it hurt. It hurt. The unusual part was my first recruiting class. I can tell you exactly who it was. The class I recruited by myself. I'm the head coach. Bob Conroy's going to join me in July. My first class was 4 African Americans and 2 Caucasians. John Rudley, John Brisker, Bob Miller, and Calvin Lausche. So I don't have any thoughts about being biased. Jimmy Hayes and Steve Mix were the other 2 people in that class. The interesting part about that is one of them's a doctor. 2 of them played in the NBA. Let's see. Rudley's a president of a college. Jimmy Hayes is a medical doctor. Brisker and Mix played in the NBA, and Mix is a college graduate. Calvin Lausche is a doctor of education, and he was temporarily vice president of the University of Toledo. The class did extremely well. So, and it hurt, but guess what? It helped in the long run. We placed an emphasis on going to school and having people graduate, and the program was pretty darn good, probably the best in the school's history.
Now, I want to ask you also about, by most accounts, you were cautious, maybe that's the best word, with the news media. And sometimes the broadcasters and the sports writers didn't know how to take that. How would you describe your relationship with the news media over the years as a head coach?
Well, I thought it was okay. I'm actually a very shy person. I'm naturally shy. And probably one of the areas that I wasn't ready to, I didn't have much experience in that area. We had a lot of good writers, though. Jim Taylor, Tom Loomis, those were good guys. I was just a cautious guy, that's all. But I was cautious at practice. I was cautious at home.
Were you uncomfortable with what we would describe as the public side of being a head coach, the speeches, the alumni events? You had to do those, but were you a little bit uncomfortable doing that?
Yeah, it's really, it isn't something that I put at the top of the list, yes. Yeah, but I don't think I'm a bad guy, but you know, it's tough to be all those things. So.
Yeah. You had 2 losing seasons at the end of your career at the University of Toledo, the only 2, I think. Probably not how you wanted it to end, was it?
No. I didn't do a good job. We had pretty good players. Just didn't do as good a job of coaching as I should have.
Did you feel it was time?
Yes, it was. Although I would have loved to see if I couldn't have corrected the situation. But
is it tough for you? Has it been tough in the years since? I think you resigned in 1987. In the quarter century since then, to watch UT basketball now, has it been difficult?
There's been some good times in there. There's been some tough times in there. It's been interesting. I do think they got a little tougher ball game than I had, but
what do you miss most?
Actually, I've done some things since then. I like coaching basketball, and I've done a little coaching. I love coaching. I love to get out on the floor, working with the players and watching them get better. And I've still done that in some little areas, yes.
Yeah. Now, we haven't talked much about your wonderful family. 6 children, I believe, and at least one of them, your daughter Nancy, did follow you into coaching, didn't she, for a time?
Yes. She was the basketball coach at Stetson University for, I'm guessing, 10 or 12 years. And she went to Weber International University as athletic director, and she was athletic director there for 8 or 10 years. She's now Dean of Women, teaches at Weber International University. They brought in football, and that was going to be kind of tough for a female athletic director. So she and the president worked it out. She teaches there. She's counseling and testing. Kept the golf coaching job, both I think male and female. And she's still there. Probably going to have a good retirement situation because she's been in the state of Florida for a long time.
Here's your chance to brag about your other children.
Well, they've all turned out very well. Proud of every single one of them. All very different. Maybe because I was so cautious, but Barbara did a great job of bringing up the children. They're the luckiest kids in the world to have Barbara Nichols. She just did a great job of hitting a happy medium of raising them and disciplining them and giving them enough rope that they learn some things on their own. I was awfully busy, you know. And,
indeed you were. She was a partner in all of that, wasn't she?
Sally lives out in Phoenix, and she's vice president of Wells Fargo Bank. She's doing very well. Nancy lives in Florida. Bob lives in Florida and doing very well for himself. Mary Pat lives in Florida. She's raising 3 wonderful children. Nick is a sophomore in high school, and she's got a boy and a girl that are twins in the 7th or 8th grade, and doing well. Jane lives here in Toledo, works at Team Sports with Jay Lehman, one of our former players, doing very well. And Jim Nichols lives in Toledo and doing very well. Works at Team Sports also.
Yep, great family. In 2012, as we sit here, you were accorded a special honor. You were inducted into the Mid-American Conference Hall of Fame. What did that mean to you?
Just dynamite, out of sight. I'm not sure I deserve it, but...
the winningest coach in the history of the MAC, you're not sure?
Well, you know, I didn't do that by myself. Guys like Jim McDonald and Bob Conroy probably belong in there also. That isn't the way the game works, but and I had some players that probably belong in it. Steve Mix and Tom Kozelko and Jay Lehman might belong in that Ohio Hall of Fame. They were good players. But I met Wayne Embry. He was inducted at the same time, a famous guy from
Sure.
Miami of Ohio. Had an enjoyable visit, and I'm honored.
And in 2011, you were inducted into the Toledo City League Hall of Fame for your many successful seasons at Central Catholic. That had to mean just as much.
Just as much. The better part about that was and I'm not saying that the City League isn't what it was a lot tougher when I was there.
Mm-hmm.
There were 7 teams in the City League, and there was no cupcake in the Woodward was extremely tough in basketball.
You still had DeVilbiss, you still had Macumber.
DeVilbiss. You got guys like Buzz Muhart went to DeVilbiss. The guy that went to Ohio U.
Jimmy Jackson at...
Jimmy Jackson. There was a guy that went to Ohio U.
Mm-hmm. But a whole host of great players.
Those teams were, those 7 teams were tough. When you went through, we played everybody twice. It was, and the unusual part is 3 of our 7 teams at Central Catholic High School are going to be in the Hall of Fame at Central Catholic High School. So they're starting to figure out that it was the players and not just the coach by himself.
And certainly we have to talk about a major honor in your career, and that's when your alma mater, University of Toledo, named the basketball court at Savage, the Bob Nichols court. Can you talk about how that made you feel?
Just out of sight. I have trouble believing it today. I go to the game and I just, that's hard to believe, that your name is on the floor. There's a bunch of guys back in Jackson that won't believe that, you know, but I'm honored.
I'm sure your players believe it, and they applauded it.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, it could be Barbara Nichols' name down there too, because raising 6 kids, going back to college after she raised the 6 kids, got her bachelor's, master's degree, and did a good job.
I remember Barbara, of course, when she came to work at the Blade, and we worked alongside each other for a while.
She worked on zip line.
So did I.
Did you?
We were there at the same time.
Yeah.
Bob, you're, what, 82 years old?
Yep.
You had an outstanding career. You have a wonderful family, a life well lived. Any regrets?
Maybe done a couple things a little differently, but...
We can all say that, I suspect. Yeah. Have you given any thought to your legacy? How would you like to be remembered?
I don't know. Took advantage of my opportunity. The University of Toledo gave me a basketball scholarship. I took advantage of it. Central Catholic gave me a chance, and I took advantage of it.
Hard work and ethics and character, all important considerations.
I guess just giving somebody gives you an opportunity, you take advantage of it. I'd like to say that we did the best we could with the opportunities that were given to us.
Yeah. Coach Bobby Nichols, I want to thank you so much for the gift of your time today. We've had a wonderful conversation. I've learned a lot, and I certainly hope that you have learned a lot as well. Once again, we thank you for your interest in the Sight and Sound Video Archives project of the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library. And remember, never stop reading and never stop learning.